technologies and start living in more of a basic way. So my question is, do you see there being a return to primitivism after peak oil? And if so, would you advocate this?
I think that's such an interesting question. We'll just ask.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, I kind of think that there could be what we might call a scientific primitivism. I mean, I think that's, I mean, almost like what you see here is a sort of scientific primitivism. I think we can get back to very basic values, and this is the sort of thing that Dieter's trying to do in Latvia. So using the fruits of science and technology to actually help ordinary human beings rather than make money out of it. Because we have had amazing advances in science. I'm a scientist, you know, in the last 100 years we've created such powerful machines and such wonderful scientific inventions, and yet all that's happened is that well, I say we, but is that the bad guys, and I think there are bad guys and good guys in this, the bad guys have used this science and bought scientists in order to make more and more money. And in fact, what we could do is we could use the best of the science to make our lives easier, and take the worst of the scientists and put them in jail.
Hey!
You say science has been a bit too established, and there haven't been enough sort of people-minded scientists.
I agree, absolutely. And the reason for that is because they don't. Is because the system we have is one where people get paid. So scientists now are not like the adventurers in science, the amateurs that existed at the time of the Victorians, or even in the beginning of the century, really wanted to know the answer. Actually, I include myself in that lot. There are people who work for big companies to make money, and basically they tell the companies what they want to know in order to get payments. It's quite disgraceful. I'm really ashamed of science at the moment.
Right.
Hi.
And we're going to go back to a primitive society.
Okay, well, if primitivism, I hate isms, has anything to do with anything, we do need to understand how human beings seem to have been designed, and that's to live together in a trusting community, and to look at how we're being separated off and how we're being disempowered and misled and misinformed by being separated off into nuclear families. And I think this is very, very basic need for humanity, is to come together in a more tribal-like way. And we can do that actually by looking at how to create trust within our streets and how to find your neighbours. And I do think older women can help with this process. So we should also know not to trust all these people who have made themselves very powerful. And I think when you're in a collective way of thinking and relating, you automatically, you more naturally understand that people who are greedy are not to be trusted. People who are trying to tell you what to do, like religious people or rich people or whatever, who want to use you, then when you're collectively understanding that these people are misleading humanity, then we get to be very strong. And we know that we can, by bringing an understanding of what it is to be a human being, that we can gain a certain intelligence that we seem to have lost. We can reconnect with our deepest intelligence and not trust these fraudsters called Shell and BP and so on, because they're misleading us and they're lying to us. And we know that we never needed petroleum in the beginning anyway.
Just before we take Tom's answer, John, what time and when is music starting? Are we... 7:32 or something. Okay, so we'll take Tom's answer and Mike's answer, or if Mike doesn't come back, we'll ask Steve to quickly jump in on the last section. Is peak oil going to lead us to a primitive society?
Is peak oil going to lead us to a primitive society? Let's bloody well hope so, because it's fantastic, isn't it? Like, if we want to actually be human again, if we actually want to breathe again, we've got to do this. We've got to do it, you know. And whether it's peak oil that drives us there, or whether we embrace it, because it looks like so much more fun and so much more healthy for every single level of our being, then let's do it. And the gentleman's question over there, is peak oil, you know, are we barking up the wrong tree? it doesn't matter anymore, because this is how I got into it. It was from the perspective of, oh shit, you know, we're running out of energy, we're running out of resources, we need solutions, we need, there's going to be chaos in the streets and the da-da-da and the government and the da-da-da, and all that stuff is still there. But don't worry about that. Where is the joy? Where is the creativity? Where is the life force? Where is our hearts? Let's follow things from that perspective, not, you know, running away from things in fear. Forget about that stuff. If, you know, if oil isn't making you happy in your life, don't worry about it. You know, we can do something else that's way more fun and way more engaging. And when people see that, they're human beings as well, you know? People love to dance inside, you know, whether they've forgotten it or not. People love to be free. People love colourful, you know, exuberant life with rich food.
They live like a festival.
They've grown themselves, you know? And these things are just, and I could go on and on and on and list them, but these things are so brilliant and so full of, like, a smile, you know, that just keeps on giving and giving and giving. And the old models, let's give them a chance to fall away. If we keep putting our focus on what we don't want and what we have to do because we have to do it and why we have to do it, don't worry about why we have to do it. Why do you want to do it? Let's do it for those reasons, and that's why I hope we can see a primitive society, peak oil or not.
Thank you. All right, because we haven't finished quite soon, Steve Pank was next up on the panel, so we're going to welcome Steve Pank, Reece Sangnu from the Legalised Cannabis Alliance and various different opportunities.
Thank you. Okay, yeah, well, let's talk about peak oil, just as to
we are 2 minutes, though, I should say.
And say whether or not you call it peak oil or not, it's getting more expensive and it's getting rarer. There's a limit to the amount of environmental damage we can afford to get out what's remained there. There's a limit to the number of wars we can fight to get control of what's left, right? We've got to move on. We've used oil and coal for 150 years, right? It's time we moved on to a new technology, or maybe an old technology. So we've had wind, and when they first did the first windmills, there was complaints about them in the Middle Ages because they didn't like what they looked like, specifically the people who owned watermills, right? Let's talk about energy diversity. We can use some biofuels, we can use some wind power, we can use some water power, we can use wave power, we can use zero-point energy, we can use possibly even ways of harnessing gravity. If the money was there, if people put money up to research it and pay people to find these ways, they'd find them. Look at the man who put up £100,000 for the first person to invent man-powered flight. And what he said, that's impossible, you know, you could never have an aeroplane powered by a human. And then they flew one across the channel, right, pedaled by a cyclist, champion cyclist who could also fly these, kites. Anyway, so to move on, so that's the first thing. We've got to look at new energy, which may also be old energy. And the other thing is to live more economically. You know, we can walk, we can cycle, we can manage without trips. You know, it's not just a question of going the old way. The point about it is where the money is. That's what follows what the technology is. Let's invest in new ways of doing it.
Thank you.
As I recall, the question was about primitivism. And one of the questions I get asked a lot, or accused a lot, is that you're trying to turn the clock back. And I think that what we ignore is the many advances of technology. And I point to so we've learned from the past. In the past, you would cut the wood and you would throw it onto an open fire, and that would barely keep you warm in the winter. But now we've learned things like wood-fired burners. And so 2 or 3 logs can actually heat the whole home for the whole evening. And so, you know, we need to learn from the past, but also recognise that we've advanced and we've learned many fantastic things as well. So in some ways we will go to a less fossil fuel energy, but we will also have the knowledge of things that we have done that will make it very different from the way that it was in the past.
Well, I'd just like to put in a 2 pennies worth. And I think somebody did say that we are eventually, come the post-oil fossil fuel period, we are going to be, I'm not sure quite a primitive society, but we will certainly exist without fossil fuels. And whilst we'll have many of the skills that we had prior to fossil fuels 150 years ago, we've also, as Mike was just saying, made huge, huge technological advances. So I think in a way we can look forward to sort of 2050, 2060 when there's virtually, or according to many sort of retired geologists as opposed to current geologists, when there's going to be really very, very little oil left, and what is left will be priceless, in that most of us won't have any use for it, so it won't have a price. But the few people who are still addicted to oil, for them the price, they will pay anything. You know, if you think of a gallon of petrol has 300 man-hours of energy in it, which is a huge, huge amount of energy just in that little gallon container. Now which would move a Range Rover 9 or 10 miles. That 1 gallon, it would take you or me 300 hours to do the same thing. You know, I would pay a load of money not to have to push that car that much, you know. So the price is going to go up. So whilst I agree that comes with a 2050, 2060, we will be primitivist in some senses. But the real thing is getting to that situation. The real thing is the next 30, 40 years, while we figure out a way to wean ourselves off oil. And obviously this gathering, the whole green movement, we talked about it earlier as being a sort of new ideology, is very much about that, of trying to find a way to live without fossil fuels in a way that doesn't cause climate change. But it is going to be the next few decades, and we've got a clear choice. We either leave the price of energy up to the market and availability to decide, or we do it equitably and we have a system of tradable carbon rations, i.e. everybody as a right gets a percentage, you know, a free carbon ration to sell, i.e. amount of CO2 that they can emit. And if they, and that amount they emit starts off where it is now, drops 9 or 10% each year, so that in 8 or 9 years we get down to using, you know, 10-20% of the amount of energy we're using at the moment, which the science is quite clear, that's the only way we're going to tackle climate change. But the key thing is it's equitable. You know, it's not a matter of just leaving the OAPs to be unable to afford fossil fuels whilst the wealthy can afford it. It's equitable. Everybody gets an equal share. If you don't want to use your share, you can sell it. And if you want to use more than your share, if you want to go and visit family in Australia or whatever, you can buy an extra share. So it's redistributive economically, i.e. greener people and poorer people would make money out of it, which I think politically is a key thing, because at the moment we're asking people in the last 20 years to make individual changes for the common good, and it's not working. You know, in terms of solving climate change, we have to accept the fact it's just not working. Society is so addicted to this amazingly useful fossil fuel that we are not weaning ourselves off it quick enough to prevent runaway climate change. So, you know, we have two choices. We either let the market decide upon the price, or we go for personal tradable carbon rations, which be difficult to set up in many ways, but it will be equitable. A quick question. Sorry, is music imminent?
Yeah, that's about 4 minutes.
Sorry, I just keep doing this. I think then, James, I think you better have the last word. I can't be waffling on.
Well, I kind of disagree with your choices, really, because
Any last comments?
Hello. Yeah.
Oh, we're all going
I rather disagree with the choices that you're offering, really, because...
Give us a third choice, then.
Well, no, all right. But I'll just go for the two choices that you've offered, say why I don't like those two choices. So letting the market decide is business as usual.
We don't like that.
Give everybody a personal choice about whether they buy more credits if they want to fly to Australia, or if they don't want to use their credit, they can sell it. But you know, when you come down to like, every individual everywhere has got a carbon credit, they can do what they choose with. I mean, that's why
poor people in poor countries sell their kidneys, isn't it? Because the people with the money that have got the money to buy them will just exploit those people. So if you're poor, you're going to sell your carbon credit, aren't you?
I don't think it will work like that. I don't think it will work like that. Anyway, how do you think it will work?
Is this a comment on this, or is this our final wrap up the whole?
If you want to incorporate both, go ahead.
That would probably be a good idea. I'll run over the minute. I see changes coming anyway, so I think whether it's tradable, equitable quotas and so on, I think it's academic. Where I disagree with you is your dates, that it's decades away. I think it's handful of years away. We're really at the point where the whole system isn't going to function anymore, and these questions about energy quotas and so on are going to be completely academic. So change is here, and get ready for it.
A new ideology is necessary to sort all of this out. We can't fiddle with the current one. There has to be a completely new approach. A new ideology has to be sat down, sorted out by a committee of wise men and women, shall I say? So a sort of Sanhedrin committee. This has to be designed. We have to design the society, because a society that depends upon what the people want at the time and what the politicians will give them in order to be elected is doomed to produce a worse and worse society.
You can be quite quick, please. Bands are, I think, waiting.
Okay, do people remember the Mama's warning? It was the beginning of the 90s. A man called Alan Herrera from the BBC was invited to go and work with Colombian Indians in the Sierra Nevada, and he brought back extraordinary footage of them trying to tell us that we must stop taking the vital organs and the blood of the Mother Earth, and unless we do, we will die, and surely we see that we are dying. And look out for that documentary, find it again, The Mama's Warning, Alan Herrera, about the Kogi, K-O-G-I.
Fascinating book. All right, do you want to, quick as you can please, sorry, because the bands are waiting now.
Peak oil, whether it happens as you envisage or not, whether there are ways that we can make clean, free, abundant energy in our own homes, don't wait for these things to make a change. Follow your heart, don't follow the mind, don't follow the media, don't follow the fear. Let's just make the most beautiful thing that we can for our children and their children and their children's children. Will it change? Will the buildings come down by themselves? I don't know, maybe it will take big waves, but we'll see what happens, huh?
Okay, well, I'm going to stand up for this. I'm a campaigner. I think we should all go down to the London Stock Exchange and flood the place with leaflets telling them that there's money to be made in putting money into things that actually save the planet and save the environment. It's an investment for the future and an investment forever. And why don't they act together and stop actually raping the planet?
Yeah!
Good. Thank you very much, everybody, for coming on. Thank you for our panel, Steve Pank, Tom Ragerwoods, Chris Busby and Max Renville. We'll be doing the same again tomorrow, I think 5 till 6. And there's going to be bands on shortly. Thank you for coming. Thank you. 4 minutes. Well done. But it wasn't.